Hi everyone, thank you for joining me here on Moonstone Makes. My name is Tommy. This is another book video. So today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in February. Thank you for joining me for my last book video. If you did, I really appreciate it. I hope to do a book video like this every month for everything that I read that month. So this month, well last month, it's March now, I read 4 books and I DNF'd 1 book, which means I didn't finish it. So I'm just going to get into it now. If you want to follow me anywhere on the internet, you can find me at DynamiteTrujillo. All my links are in the description box below. So the first book that I read in February was Kindred by Octavia Butler. And this book was written in 1979. And it's largely considered to be science fiction, but I would say it's more of a historical fiction, speculative fiction kind of novel. And it's really good. It follows the main character, Dana, who is a writer. She's a Black woman living in Los Angeles in 1976. And she is married to her white husband, Kevin. They just bought a house. They're in their house, and time travel starts to happen. So the time travel is the one science fiction aspect, and it's never really explained. It's just kind of used as a plot device to tell a story. So pretty much Dana, she's in her like late 20s, I think, and she's in her home. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, she gets transported back to pre-Civil War America. She gets transported to Maryland, and she shows up there out of nowhere, saves a little kid who's about to drown, and then almost immediately gets transported back to like her living room. And, you know, it's confusing, blah, blah, blah. But this pretty much happens over and over and over. And what she starts to realize is that she's tied to this little kid whose name is Rufus. And she continues over a very short period of time from her perspective and her like home, modern Los Angeles time. So she keeps getting transported back, and she ends up following Rufus's life as he gets older and older. She's pretty much tied to this one character. And Rufus is the son of a plantation owner, a slaveholder, and it ends up following him through his life to when he grows up to be an adult, takes over the plantation, and it follows his relationship with Dana. So this book is an exploration of American slavery through the lens of a modern American Black woman, and modern meaning like 1970s. It's very well done. It's really good. It's an interesting perspective on the slave narrative. It's really hard to read at times. It's definitely intense and heavy and real and blunt about the subject matter. It's very good. It's very metaphor heavy. There's just a lot in here that represents other things. So there's a lot of stuff in here about Dana and her kind of transitioning into having to become a slave, and how she deals with it, how she processes this trauma, and her relationships with the other slaves, with Rufus, and how all of that can be kind of a metaphor for modern times, modern people, how us as Americans have over time dealt with our own history of slavery. And it's a really good read. Like I said, it's hard at times because it's about something really heavy, but Octavia Butler has this really great skill in her novels of taking really harsh subject matter, and she's just so straightforward about it and making it somehow easy to read. I mean, I flew through this book in like 2 days. I don't know if it was just like my attachment to the characters or that the plot was so driving, but even though this book was so hard to read at times, it was such like an addictive read. Like I kind of couldn't stop reading it. So it's just really good. The writing is definitely a little straightforward and blunt. Sometimes it's a little clunky here and there. I find that to be kind of a theme with Octavia Butler's work, is that she's just really like to the point with her writing. And there are times when that's just like so good. But there are times when it does read a little, I don't know, like I said, like a little clunky or something. But it's overall such a fantastic book. I definitely recommend this one. And that was Kindred by Octavia Butler. The next book that I read in February was Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. This is a contemporary fiction Japanese novel. It was translated from Japanese, and it's a pretty recent book. I'm not sure when it was published, but I'm pretty sure in the last couple of years. And this one was great. It's contemporary fiction, but it has elements of fantasy and like fairy tale kind of fantasy. And it's pretty much, it follows the story of 7 junior high age kids who all have this thing in common where they are not going to school. They should be going to junior high, but they don't go. And they all have different stories about why they're not going, but essentially the common thread is like there's some kind of trauma or something that makes them kind of unable to go out into the world and be in school. So they all end up meeting in this castle, and they all have access to this castle through mirrors in their homes. And they're all strangers. They meet up in the castle, and it's, it's a found family kind of story. That aspect of it is wonderful. And the person in the castle who kind of like tells them what's what is the Wolf Queen. She is a little girl. I think she's supposed to be about 6 years old, and she wears a wolf mask, and she calls herself the Wolf Queen, and she wears like party dresses. And she pretty much tells them that they've all been invited to do this thing at this castle, and they have free access to the castle. The idea is to find a key and find a wishing room, and whoever finds the key and finds the wishing room can go there and get one wish granted. But once your wish is granted, no one else gets to make a wish. It's just one kid. And your access to the castle is over. You can't go anymore. Pretty much all of these kids who cannot go to school, who cannot be social, are meeting up together in this castle like every day. And it just kind of follows that story. And overall, it was such a good book. It was really great. The first half of the book starts out kind of slow, and honestly, the writing in the first half of the book, maybe translation, it's hard to know when books are translated, to me was a little annoying. It definitely felt like it was from the point of view of a junior high kid because it was all very awkward. The main character, whose name is Kokoro, it's from her point of view, and she is like so painfully awkward around other people that almost entirely her only dialogue in like the first half of the book is like people will say things to her and the only way she can respond is but then it like goes through her thoughts, but it's that kind of over and over again. It gets a little repetitive. There are a few things in the way that the children interact with each other in the first half of the book that are just really painful as a reader. Like there's some really mean like fat phobic things in the first half when all these kids are meeting each other for the first time. It was a little difficult for me to read the first half because of that, because it's all these kids coming together for the first time. None of them are like very good at dealing with other people. So I think that just kind of all comes out in the writing, that they all, I don't know, it was a little hard to get through. But towards the end, once the kids kind of develop these attachments with each other and they start caring about each other, that kind of goes away and it gets easier to read pretty much. And then by the end, I just absolutely fell in love with it. It's weird, the way this book plays out. It's like character driven, and then at the very end, it's just intensely plot driven. And while I'm not like a plot heavy kind of person, I really love character development. The plot isn't like my main thing. The plot of this book and what ends up like happening is really what made this book for me. Like the second half of this book was like, it was just so good. It was so good. So I definitely recommend this book. There's a lot in this book of like kids dealing with their own personal traumas, a lot about kids dealing with loneliness and finding people to connect with. And also the fairy tale aspects of it are just really cool. There's a fairy tale in this book that I've never heard of before. And I went and read it, and it's very dark. The imagery in this book is also really fantastic. The imagery of like this unknown castle and them kind of searching through it, and then also each of them in their individual lives. And yeah, it's wonderful. It takes place in Japan at a junior high and at some kids' homes and at this weird castle. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's just kind of like a wonderful, kind of weird little story. And I definitely recommend it. The next book that I read was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is a book that is written as a letter to the author's mother. It is a novel, but the author, the character in the book, who is only ever called Little Dog, is supposed to be in his, like, I think mid to late 20s. And he's writing this letter to his mother about a lot of things, but kind of the narrative of it takes place over like her life before he was born, his life growing up as a little kid and as a teenager and as a young adult. And it jumps around timelines a lot. And it's not necessarily like, it's not like a just straight up narrative. It's not like a plot heavy book because it is written in the form of a letter. It kind of reads more like a memoir than anything else. And it's really beautifully written. Ocean Vuong is a poet, and you can like really tell in reading this book because the prose are just like intensely like beautiful. I mean, just the way the whole thing is written, it's just like I don't even know how to describe it. It's beautiful. Just like it's a whole book full of just like really intense, pretty prose, like in a really good way, like not in an annoying or like beating you on the head kind of way. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. But kind of the main themes in this book, it's about this guy, Little Dog, and his mother and his grandmother, and a couple of the relationships that he develops when he's a kid and then later on. So his mom moved to America from Vietnam, and it kind of follows this idea of exploring immigrants in America and what they've gone through and like what this mother does. Like some of the things this mother does with her son are like not cool, but it also goes into like her own traumatic past. And it's a really beautiful story about a lot of pain, pretty much. So yeah, there's a lot about when he's a kid in this book and his relationship with his mom and with his grandmother too, and the rest of his family. He also develops a relationship with another boy whose name I can't remember, but it goes into their relationship and their kind of love story. And it's all like none of it's that happy, you know what I mean? It's a story about like pain and loss and loneliness and things being hard, and it's all written in such a poetically beautiful way, and I love stuff like that. So I mean, there's not much more to say about it. There's like, you know, it's like a memoir, and those are kind of the themes. And if you're into that kind of stuff, I think you should read it. But I also just think like most people should read it. It's very good. I don't know. I mean, I could see some readers not being able to get through the prose the way they are, especially since it's not like a timeline-based narrative or anything. But it's a wonderful book. I absolutely loved it. Definitely recommend it. It's so good. Okay, so the next book and the last book that I read and finished in February was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. And this book, kind of like Lonely Castle in the Mirror, started out kind of slow and like not that great for me, but as it went on, like something about the plot development really made it hit home for me, and I loved this book. So this is like a speculative fiction kind of sci-fi kind of book. It's about an AI, and in the book they're called AFs, which stands for Artificial Friend. The whole book is told through from the perspective of Clara, who is an AF. She's a sentient robot. And it starts out at the beginning of the book, kind of at the beginning of her life existing. She's in a storefront where she's being sold, and she gets picked up by a family, and it follows her story with that family. And at the beginning of the book, Clara is new and she doesn't know that much yet. And so the book kind of follows her from her perspective, getting to know her child, who is like, her owner pretty much, and her relationship with her and her family, but also her relationship with the rest of the world and how she learns and develops and becomes more of like a full sentient person, That's kind of basically the idea. There are a lot of things in this book. One, obviously, it's called Clara and the Sun. Clara's relationship with the sun is a big theme in this book. The AFs are like solar powered, so they are aware that they get their energy from the sun. And I don't know if all the AFs in this world do this, but Clara does it. She really, like, the sun is like a character. It is like another person to her. And she essentially kind of worships it. It feels like something religious. Like, she talks to the sun as if she's praying to it. She asks the sun for things. She does things in honor of the sun so that her loved ones can stay safe. And that's a really interesting element that's explored in this book. The world in this book is really interesting, and it can be a little frustrating at times, but overall I really liked it. It's kind of like the whole iceberg thing, where this book, the author gives you little glimpses of the world and how things work in the society, but doesn't explain a lot of them at all. And so certain things that relate to the story and relate to the world around Clara, but a lot of them are never really explained. So you never really understand how things got like that, or like what exactly these things are. Like, for example, Clara's family that purchases her has a daughter, and the daughter is a teenager, and her name is Josie. So Clara's relationship with Josie is pretty intense. Clara's like whole existence is based off of like serving Josie and being a friend to her. Josie's been lifted, and lifted is a thing that is explained a little bit in the book, but not a whole lot. What we do know is that when like a parent can make a choice for their kid to get lifted, to give them opportunities in life. Like, they can get into college if they're lifted. I think it makes them smarter or something, but it also can make them sick. And I think it might be just kind of random. Like, if a kid gets lifted, they might get sick and die, but they may not. And that's never really explained. There's also seems to be like some political unrest, and like in a really dangerous way in this world that doesn't quite get explained. It also seems that if your kid is lifted and they actually have a chance of like making something of themselves, they'll be safe, and otherwise it's really dangerous. There are just a lot of little details like that in this world that get alluded to in terms of what they have to do with the story and with the characters, but never are explained beyond that. And I think that is an interesting choice, and I think it makes it makes the book a little tantalizing. You know what I mean? Like, you're not really quite getting everything you want, but it's good. It's good. It's in a good way. It leaves a lot to your own imagination and to fill in certain gaps in the story in your mind. But yeah, so, it's from the perspective of an AI making her way through this world with her people, and learning about them and developing relationships with them. It also, plot-wise, takes a pretty dark turn about halfway through the book. So there are interesting things going on. It's not just all character development and relationship building. It's stuff happens, and it's cool. It's really cool. It's a really sad book, though. I feel like sadness and loneliness and trauma are like themes in all the books I read this month, but it's very good. Yeah, it was a slow build-up for me, but by the end of this book, I was very much into it, and I thought it was very good. I can't say any more without spoiling it, but it was very good. And if you are reading it and you're like halfway through and you're like, oh no, just keep reading it. Just like keep reading it. Yeah, it's great. I love how it explores artificial intelligence. It's a great speculative fiction novel. I loved it. I loved it. Now, those are the four books that I read. I did DNF one book, and that was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is like a crazy popular high fantasy series, and I thought I would give it a shot, and I didn't. I wasn't for me. So I don't know much about this book. What I can tell you is it's going to be a series of 10 books, and four of them are out. And I think each one is about 1,000 pages, and it's like I went into it thinking it was like, Lord of the Rings-esque kind of epic fantasy kind of thing. I'm pretty sure that's like pretty on the nose, right? Like I think that's what it is. And I love Lord of the Rings. I love fantasy, and I love the idea of that kind of fantasy, like Lord of the Rings kind of fantasy. But this book came in hot with like battle scenes, war, fight scenes, action, that kind of stuff. And I know all that's part of like the whole high fantasy, like epic thing, but those are the parts about it that I don't like. The parts about it, those things that I do like are kind of the more mellow things and the more like the journey and like the traveling and the stuff and like the interesting creatures. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But this book was a little too action-packed for me. I didn't get very far into it. I don't know. I probably read the first like 50 pages and was like, there's just a lot of fighting and stuff and like political details and stuff. And so I kind of flipped through forward, like, 200 pages, 500 pages, 700 pages. And like every time I opened it, it was like something really actiony or like something really like, I don't know, just very plot heavy. You know what I mean? So it just wasn't for me. I don't know. I tried it and I wasn't into it, so I stopped reading it. That would be a huge commitment. This is a very long series. And I think if you're into that kind of thing and you haven't read it yet, it seems like you should because people freaking love these books, like a lot. And I think they just weren't for me. So I did not finish that. But I guess there's no but. I didn't finish it, and that is it. So that's everything that I read and I tried to read in the month of February. And I would love to hear about what you read in February. If you don't mind telling me in the comments below, that would be wonderful. Yeah, definitely this month was heavy on the fantasy, speculative, sadness, loneliness, and trauma. I don't know. I don't like plan my books in advance. I kind of just, when I finish one book, I look through my TBR, which is like 50 books long, and I just kind of pick one at random that I want to read next, and that's just how it went this month. But I am very excited to have shared them with you. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoy videos like these, please do give it a thumbs up, give me a comment below, and subscribe to my channel yet if you haven't. That would be lovely. And I will see you in my next book video, either in a month for what I read in March, or maybe sooner. I keep trying to film a TBR video to briefly go over the 50 books on my TBR. I keep not being able to do it, but I want to. I want to. And if you're here for the knitting videos too, I'll see you in my next knitting video, and I hope you're having a really great day. All my links are in the description box below. If you want to follow me on Instagram or join my Patreon, all that stuff is down there. Thank you for being here, and I will see you next time. Bye.